welcome everyone. We are so thrilled to be here. So welcome to our panel, Fashion is Social and Environmental Justice. And this is Dr. Hakan Karaosman, and I am a social scientist working at University College Dublin, and I am the principal researcher of a multi-stakeholder industrial and action research project in collaboration with European Commission. And I am thrilled to be here with three amazing, brilliant thought leaders, and I cannot wait to hear your thoughts, because we are really here to change things and to show how to transform the fashion industry. We have the brilliant Francois Souchet, the lead from Ellen MacArthur Foundation's Make Fashion Circular project. Francois, welcome. We have Matteo, the co-founder of WRAD. Hello, Matteo, welcome.
Hi.
And we have Antoinette. She is Dr. Antoinette Fionda-Douglas, and she's the co-founder of Beira. Welcome, Antoinette.
Hello, thank you, Hakan.
Okay, so why are we here? Because we need to talk. We need this honest conversation to talk about circular economy in the context of climate change, because things are quite challenging, and we need to ensure social and environmental justice takes place for everyone across all levels in fashion supply chains, because we need to create a new system in which boundaries that our planet has, also social dimensions, are respected, and everything takes place in a very holistic and inclusive ways. So we are so thrilled to be here, and let's discuss how to make the industry go through this vertical transformation. But before, I would like to start with the climate change. Why climate change is so important? Because climate change has become one of the biggest risks of our time. 18 of the warmest years were recorded during the last 20 years, while vulnerable populations being extremely and dramatically affected. Climate change has direct implications on raw materials, natural systems, water, biodiversity, and livelihoods. As an instance, in the last 10 years in Mongolia, more than 9 million livestock animals perished because of climate change. So this is a big problem, but we need to act upon the solution all together. Why? Because science and research shows us that the big problems, especially the most critical supply chain risks, need transformational partnerships and collaboration. Therefore, to tackle this big problem, which is climate change, we need to form inclusive partnerships at all levels. However, the amount of progress made in the fashion industry doesn't match what is necessary. We need a radical transformation. Therefore, I would like to start this discussion with you guys to understand how to accelerate this transformation, to become more than less unsustainable, to ensure social and environmental justice take place for everyone in and across fashion supply chains. And I would like to kick off the discussion with Francois. Hello, Francois.
Hey, Hakan.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Perfect. So nice to have you here. So thank you for being with us. And I would like to start with you. Circular economy. Circular economy, by definition, aims to create restorative and regenerative industrial settings. So my question is, how can we bring this concept to the fashion context? How do you think fashion could become circular?
Well, I think it's a very good question, Hakan, and you set the context really right in terms of the environmental degradation. I think when we look at the current model of fashion, it's extremely linear. Like, we take stuff, we transform it into product that we use and less and less before discarding into mostly landfill or incinerator, and that creates extreme levels of waste and pollution. And when we talk about waste, it's not only the material waste. Like, the industry today generates the equivalent of a truckload of garment that goes to landfill or incineration every second. But there's also massive amount of money that are wasted through this model. Through clothing that's barely worn and rarely recycled, we estimated that the industry misses out on around $500 billion a year. And as you brilliantly said, we need, in terms of transformation, more than doing a bit less unsustainable. Because if you're just trying to slow down the pace at which you're creating the harm, you just delay the time by which you're going to have like catastrophic consequences, but you're not really transforming your impact. So what you need is a new direction. And for us, a circular economy is a great framework to find ways to create economic development decoupled from resources use. And the way we envision circular economy for fashion is where clothing is used more, is made to be made again, and is made from safe and renewable resources. And so practically that means we need new business models that increase clothing use, like rental, resale, repair, remaking. We need to align the product conception and design with what's coming next for that product. So think about the end from the beginning. Think about, will you want to reuse the fabric? Will you want to recycle the product? Will you want to transfer the product between owners? And the final aspect is we need materials to come from safe and renewable resources. Today, the industry relies on nearly 100 billion tons of non-renewable resources every year. And to transform that, make it come from renewable ones or recycled ones. And we also need to move towards safe input, making it safe for the environment, safe for everyone involved.
Perfect. It is really interesting. And also the way you illustrate is really understandable. And I would like to go deeper. Also, we need to acknowledge that the fashion industry has been taking some steps to become more environmental friendly. And we acknowledge those efforts. But we are still having this problem about the supply chains, because supply chains are so dispersed, so fragmented, and so complex across the world. So my question is, how should we really restructure this system to make it inclusive for everyone at all supply chain levels? So how can we ensure all supply chain members are represented in this transition?
I think it's a very fair point. And one of the things that's quite critical is the importance of changing the incentives that exist within this supply chain. Today, the incentives are mostly around volume, economies of scale, and growing the volume year on year. The way we assess the success and the performance of companies is whether they manage to grow their volume year on year. And that needs to fundamentally change. And then if you really want to reorganize that industrial system, we think there's like three components that are needed. The first one is to align all the actors behind a shared vision. Because if you all agree on the direction that you want to take, it becomes a lot easier to work together. And actually, if you also need that vision to be supported with very clear definitions, so that not only do you aspire to the same future, but also you are speaking the same language. Today, recycle, for example, means 20 things to 20 different people. So you need to make sure that in terms of vocabulary, you're really aligned so you know what you're talking about. The second thing is you need clarity around the actions that every actors around the system need to take in order to move towards that vision. And you need to move away from kicking the can or just transferring responsibility to other people. You need to own your own responsibilities and take action towards it. We did a project last year and this year called the Genes Redesign, where we basically brought together 80 experts from the entire jeans industry, ranging from the people making the raw materials to the people who recycle the jeans in the end, and everyone in between. And to each of these actors, we asked, what would the perfect circular pair of jeans look for you? And then we worked with all these actors to solve this like kind of multiple entry equation in a way, and try to find, okay, what would that mean? And we came up with guidelines that everyone could relate to, because it was created involving everyone, and with clear action for fabric mills, garment manufacturers, brands and retailers on what do they need to do in order to achieve those guidelines. And the last aspect that you need in order to transform the system, as we think, is transparency. Transparency is super important. And transparency means being transparent about your ambitions, being transparent about where you are today, not being ashamed. We know no one's perfect, so it's absolutely fine to acknowledge that you're not perfect today. What's really important is to have a high level of ambition, to make that ambition known, and to regularly report on the progress that you're driving on that ambition. And making sure that you can demonstrate regularly how you're progressing. And that's also what worked well with our Genes Redesign project. It provided a very good starting point for a number of actors who were looking at initiating this transition, something very practical that you could do starting today, and that would progressively enable you to better understand what you need to do and to kind of start moving towards that vision.
Perfect, Francois. Thank you very much. It was really illustrative. And you are touching upon some really key constructs that we need to make this transformation happen. First of all, yeah, a shared vision. It is really important to make this language inclusive and clear, and transparency is one of the key fundamental aspects. And also you said something so important, representation. We can really, we can only ensure this transformation happens if we involve everyone at on equal grounds. But actually, everything that you say is circling around the concept of culture. Therefore, I would like to conclude, we really need to form this as a culture. So circular economy can become an actionable practice in the fashion industry only when we really can create this culture based on representation, inclusivity, justice, transparency, and resilience and effectiveness. And thank you for sharing your thoughts. It was really illustrative. We will come back to that point later with your questions with the coming from the audience. But now I would like to continue with this transformation at the system level, because as you know, as we all know, our planet has boundaries. Also, social dimensions are really, really important. And what we are going through is showing us the biggest problems, global problems, don't recognize national boundaries or brand segmentation. We all are on the same page. Therefore, we really need to form these collaborations at all levels through inclusivity. And I would like to now go to Matteo. Matteo, so far, the current fashion system has put profit before environmental and social interests. So, but the growth has to have limits. But at the same time, our challenge is the solutions that we need and that we need to form cannot be created in this traditional business settings. So my question to you, how do you see transformation? How can we really create this radical change?
Yeah, thank you, Hakan, and thank you, Francois, for sharing your points. Segueing into what Francois has said, I think this is not the moment to try to slow down a system or try to ameliorate something and trying to change maybe a material into our garments and continuing with the status quo. It is a time for radical transformation, challenging the status quo from A to Z, rethinking the same paradigm and definition of growth. For the past 250 years, we've been accustomed to believing that human prosperity was directly related to a conception of growth and GDP, which is nothing but the sum value of the goods and services that a country or company produces. And into this equation, financial capital, manufactured capital have been the primary variables that we have considered in defining the equation of growth and prosperity for humanity. The past years have instead shown us how the same concept is faulty by definition, because infinite growth into a finite planet defined by 9 planetary boundaries, as Dr. Rockstrom and the scientific community have defined in 2009, is pretty much impossible. And as we often say in physics, a system that is unsustainable ceases to exist in a second. How is it that the fashion industry has been able to just drag this unsustainability of the status quo for so long, and having accumulated so much debt with respect to the environment, the same system upon which life depends, and society, from which it is extracting natural resources, clean air, clean water, clean land, from which it is extracting labor, skills, our time, and it's delivering nothing but negative outputs. Clothing that we arguably do not need anymore. We have enough to survive for the next century or so, as we often say. Pollution, clothing that it's unrecyclable, unwealthy distribution of wealth, unhealthy distribution of wealth, sorry. How can we solve this trade-off? This is the biggest dichotomy that brands have to face today. The biggest focus area of investment, in my opinion, need to be number one on innovation. innovation of the same formulas that have driven us so far here. Circularity is one of the biggest paradigm, but we need to focus also on collaborative consumption of new business models that become more participatory by design, more inclusive, that do consider the customer as the final step of the supply chain. We have to invest in smarter materials and processes. We have to invest in transparency and traceability, because as we often say, we often talk about environmental responsibility, but without the social aspect, without social sustainability, it is almost impossible to reach that kind of like environmental paradigm shift in the way we produce goods and things, because the number one condition to work with suppliers, for example, to help them better manage their wastewater, is to know who your suppliers are. And we're not there yet. We have brands that struggle to get to their tier 1 and tier 2 level of acknowledgement of who makes their clothes. So how are we going to face all of these challenges if we don't start from a moment of social responsibility?
Brilliant, absolutely. Thank you, Matteo, for sharing this. You're absolutely right. And what we are seeing is actually there are trade-offs and contradictions, not only between business goals and sustainability, but also between social and environmental dimensions. And also that boundaries that the planet has also need to be integrated with social boundaries that we really need to ensure that take place. And I would like to go deeper with you, because we know these contradictions exist and innovation can help, but at the same time, we really need to make sure innovation is done ethically, and everything is coming with the ethics and with justice and inclusivity. And you have a very interesting case as WRAD. So please tell about what you are doing and how you are making this language inclusive, transparent, and quite transformative.
Thank you. Yes, we've started. Let me start by saying that I come from the problem. I've been working in the mainstream fashion industry. I've worked in the mainstream fashion industry for 8 years, and it took me 8 years to acknowledge and recognize unconsciously what I was doing. So in 2015, WRAD came to life, starting and focusing from what I still believe is the main driver to lead this transformation in all spheres of society, which is education. Informing, educating, empowering people with knowledge, which is probably the hardest and most valuable asset to find today, the truth, is the number one step to lead this transformative revolution that we're hoping for. With WRAD, we started, working on education and partnering. We talked about partnerships, partnering with Fashion Revolution to take our educational programs around the world. And the case is that from education, we were being able to then use that as a driver for innovation, developing new technologies to dye or create fabrics that have reduced water footprint by a significant percentage, have reduced the use of chemicals, and have been able to abstract byproducts of other industries. So I think our small case study is an example of the power of engaging into partnership that are also cross industry, really thinking, it's not even thinking outside the box, it's thinking in a fluid way, looking at systems as a fluid, a mass of players, all of which can contribute into the creation of symbiotic dynamics among themselves to eradicate waste, as the MacArthur Foundation teaches us, but also at the same time, the unavoidable waste that's created to bring it back into the system in innovative ways, because then you can actually design products that serve as a polyfunctional tool to really meet and address the true needs of humanity. And that's the ultimate goal. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So quite illustrative and quite clear. So we can say absolutely these constructs must go hand in hand, and we need to tie this through education and honesty, because at the moment we need transparency more than ever, and we absolutely need to come up with strategies that will put environmental stewardship, justice, transparency, and all of these constructs around the story to bring more people into this conversation based on honesty.
Yeah, and giving them a guide.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's really what's missing now. We're giving them a need to. We're telling them why we shouldn't engage in certain behaviors. We're inspiring them. We're doing a great job at inspiring them why they want to be part of the change. But what we're missing is a concrete, actionable how-to guide in our daily lives to make sure that we find those actions in our daily routines to truly have an impact on what matters, rather than just giving a penny to some foundations and not knowing what's happening.
Thank you, Matteo. And from here, I would like to continue with Antoinette, because now we are really going into the how to make things happen. And so far, the fashion industry has consumed social, natural, and creative resources destructively. And now we really need to form a new strategy to make things just, inclusive, and circular. And Antoinette, you are an exemplar that is showing us the question how, and you are actually showing how to make things happen. And I would like to ask you, how do you make fashion circular and just?
Thank you, Hakan. Thank you to Matteo and Francois as well. That was really interesting. I have to explain that Beira really started from a place of self-reflection. I absolutely hate to admit it, but I was a fast fashion addict. 5 years ago, I was feeling really guilty. I was questioning my purchase decision behaviour. And I was also, my background is academia, and as Matteo and Francois put it beautifully, essentially I was looking at a fashion system that was broken. And I was really embarrassed about my own actions. So I decided to become a conscious consumer. I decided to embrace that. And I had a conversation with a friend and my now business partner, Flavio Forlani. Flavio is a world-renowned luxury outerwear manufacturer. And during that conversation, he shared a problem he was having in the manufacturing process. And it was the issue of waste and spill. And from an academic perspective, I was absolutely fascinated. And I began looking into it. And like most people, I was aware of the facts of the kind of post-consumer perspective, but the pre-consumer stage in the textile value chain, I didn't really understand the scope of the issue. And I always remember reading a paper, and that this has stuck with me ever since, that on average, a vertically integrated factory producing 7 million garments per month creates 300 tons of spill per month. And that to me just, blew my mind. I thought this problem is huge and we're not talking about it. So Flavio and I came up with this idea to launch Beira to address the problem. And we did so using a strategy called design-led remanufacturing of reverse resources, which, bear with me, it's more simple than it sounds. Essentially, all we are doing is purchasing waste from the luxury fashion industry and crafting it into beautiful limited edition investment pieces. So we devised this disruptive, sustainable fashion business model, which embraced kind of 3 key elements. And the first was this new luxury. So these investment products that would stand the test of time and last in people's wardrobes for many years to come, and hopefully actually be donated down to their children, etc. Secondly, it was about an equitable and essential approach to making our product in an ethical and transparent manner. And we finally also believed that it was essential to produce in a long-term viable means through embracing the circular economy and reverse resources. So I'm going to just give you a little bit more insight on how that actually impacted in our value chain. So at design stage, it was about sustainable design. So it's designed for longevity. It was about attachment and trust, reliability and durability. The new luxury was to stand the test of time as not about 30 wears. We're talking way over 100 wears. We're talking about something that will be in wardrobes for 15, 20 years. And that impacted on even how we did our sampling. So we went straight to pre-production to reduce sample waste. And obviously something that's probably not talked about a lot is how many samples are just destroyed every year as well. From raw materials, we only source from waste. So this is end of rolls, it's cut pieces, it's trims from waste. We even source from cardboard waste, so all our boxes and stuff that I've got in my studio is made from waste. The swing tags are made from waste. Paper waste we use to make hanger cuffs, size markers, every single element is made from waste. And that has resulted in a reduction of our carbon impact and also a reduction in what is going to landfill. For our garment production, we use made in Italy, mainly. Some of the library is produced in Scotland, and that is to reduce garment miles and carbon footprint. But we also calculate our carbon footprint best we can for each product. And on average, we are just under 82% reduction in our carbon impact compared to traditional means. From a retail perspective, we are direct to customer with an honest price, as well as being honest about and transparent about our carbon footprint. We have radical price transparency. All of this information is available for our customer, and are using that to we've given our customer that to help them make informed choices. We call this slow, honest luxury, and for us, this is changing the narrative. We believe customers should not just look good, but feel great about their clothing choices. And my lack of joy when I was that fast fashion addict led me to make this absolutely central to our business model. Putting kindness and accountability first for us has led to this very loyal customer base who not only adore the product that we produce, but the story behind it. The story amplifies the love they have for their investment pieces. So this is really sort of a very short overview of really how we have embedded circularity and transparency into our business model, Hakan.
Absolutely. It's interesting because you are naming the new luxury based on honesty. And I want to ask a question about the challenges that you are facing. What is the problem that you are facing in this new way of doing things transparently in the luxury business?
Yeah. So our biggest problem has actually been that radical price transparency has actually inhibited our rate of growth, not with our customers, it's not the reaction of those, but the fear from third-party retailers. So before we started, I think nearly everyone we spoke to about the idea of radical price transparency in the industry told us not to do it. And we're not the first, we were inspired by people like Buy Honest and Everlane. But I was very stubborn and very passionate about being open and transparent about what we paid the artisans that make our product. I am not afraid to be open about this. I think this should be the future. So I would really hope that, moving forward, that department stores, boutiques engage with this and don't be afraid of that transparent future. I was really delighted on Friday when I was listening to the panel on the SDG goals with Marina Spadafora, and she was calling for change in the industry. And she was saying, brands should include transparency and accountability on their labels. They should include the origins, the carbon footprint, how much a garment worker got paid. I'm really humbled and proud to say that we're doing this at Beira. But it's much easier for us to do, I take it. We've got a very short supply chain, and it was embedded into our disruptive business model from inception. But really, we need all parts of the chain to move together and create that change. It needs to be collaborative. Not one brand or one retailer can do this alone. We must work together to bring about this radical change.
Absolutely brilliant. We absolutely need to form this partnership based on honesty and transparency at the industry at all levels. So I would like to thank each one and every one of you for this brilliant panel. And I would like to ask some final takeaways to each one of you, starting from Francois, Matteo, and Antoinette. Some final takeaways for our audience. What would you like to say to inspire more?
Well, some random thoughts. I think importance of aligning behind a common vision, taking meaningful steps to start towards it, no matter where you start doing something to move towards that vision in a meaningful way is super important, and not underestimating the importance of collaboration, sharing, and engaging in that journey.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Matteo?
Thank you. If there are, because we get this question often, any students, startuppers, people that want to enter the fashion industry to get today, I think the key aspect to remember is that the mode of action for which you can fulfill your purpose, it's through the function that you will give to your design, no longer just focusing on the product, but the function. And by saying that, we need to work to develop brands that serve a purpose, a service that goes beyond the product itself today, because there are urgent challenges that we must face. And having the understanding and awareness that our t-shirt is made with the same materials that we are needed to give people water and food and create energy and to meet the needs, that address the needs of 10 billion people in a couple of years, is a fundamental condition to enter the industry and work with this complete new mindset that will entitle you and empower you to revolutionize and create new formulas for the future.
Thank you very much. Antoinette, over to you.
Thank you again. I think for me, as an industry, we need at every level to be accountable for our actions, whether that's the way we design, the way we source. The bare minimum should be that, fashion brands are accountable for how they treat garment workers. We should be thinking about, how we engage with retail and, the plan of action for cradle to grave. All of this needs to be considered in terms of accountability. But I think, given where we are just now in the world and the impact of lockdowns had in the business, we are at a point where we're rebuilding businesses, and every action decision, I think we need to show love and kindness. And I think that's the great starting point for accountability. And, I think that everybody watching here from all over the world should lead by example too. When they buy, you should do it with your eyes open, be conscious, show love and kindness, because I hope, tomorrow has to be better, because we'll all collectively make it better. And I just want to say a huge thanks to you, Hakan, and the whole of Fashinnovation team, because, opening up this conversation on fashion is love is really helping move the industry forward to that better tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Brilliant. And all I would like to say is fashion is justice, respect, and empathy. And as you all brilliantly were pointing out, fashion is not just about the clothes, it is about the stories and those supply chain members behind the scenes. And I also have taken some final takeaways, and I would like to summarize the learning points that we got from you guys. So thank you so much for your leadership. And I would like to wrap up with some final takeaways. So in order to form a system that is socially just, economically inclusive, and environmentally regenerative, we really need to have an inclusive partnership, for which we must move away from organizational boundaries, but we need to move toward system level thinking based on a common vision, based on a common and inclusive language. Number two, fashion must exist within the limits of the earth and within the well-being for everyone across the system, in and across fashion supply chains. And last but not least, we want to see evidence. We need to understand what happens behind the closed doors, what happens behind the scenes, and therefore inclusivity, transparency, and honesty are fundamental antecedents. So I would like to thank each and every one of you for your leadership, for your amazing work, and thank you very much for changing this industry brilliantly. So I am so proud of what we have done here, and thank you to Fashinnovation team for having us. So thank you guys for making us believe that things can change and fashion is all about kindness and empathy.